Hey, hi, this is Jim. I've been out four-wheel driving around Australia most of my life, most of my adult life. I started doing motorbikes, went across the four-wheel drives, I've driven buses, trucks, etc. I've had a large range of experience with different country, different types of soil and different places. I've only just recently got back from a 14,500 kilometre trip, which included the Canning Stock route, Cameron's Corner, and back down to home at Upway in Victoria. One of the greatest questions I get asked on most of my travels: oh, what equipment do you need? What do you need? You need all this equipment. It's all this. Okay, if we're going to ask that question, I'll ask you, how long's a piece of string and how deep's your pocket? You can go out and you can buy hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to take away with you. And most of the equipment you'll never use, and I seriously debate the value of buying it. The most important thing you have is a winch on the front, right? I have an electric winch on the front. With the remote control is much better than the one with the plug-in lead. The extension strap, hooking up to the winch cable, it's a 30-metre extension strap. Hook up to a tree, anything else like that to pull you out. That's a tree protector, which I have, which I always put around the base of a tree or a pole or anything else I'm hooking onto. No matter what happens, you always have a dampener. A dampener is a safety device. It works as a parachute. You put it over the cables, etc. And if there's a failure of any joints, this will help to stop it flying through the air. And many years ago experience as I got hit in the back of the four-wheel drive, my old four-wheel drive, with a chain with a joint that snapped and ran across. I also carry one of my older snatch ropes, which is now starting to get to the stage where it's starting to fall apart. I've also got a brand new snatch rope. It's in the car here somewhere, but I can't find it at the moment. Now, what I always carry is a couple of pieces of 1-inch dowel or 25mm dowel. And these ones have only just come back from the last trip and I'll have to repaint them. But I paint them that fluorescent orange. And the idea of painting with a fluorescent orange is if you drop them in the sand or anything else or in the mud, you can always find the damn thing. So I always have at least 2 of them with me. I usually have 3, but I lost one on the last trip. Hence the reason I have 2 or 3. I never, ever use shackles. I do not like shackles. I will not use shackles. They are the most dangerous bloody thing ever invented if you're out in a four-wheel drive. So personally, I never have a shackle with me. I know some of these tow links rely on a shackle to be hooked up to. I don't have one of them. I've got a tow hook on the back of the vehicle where I can put the snatch rope straight on it, or I could hook the snatch block straight on and pull myself out. Another thing I always carry is a chain. Now that's a 30-metre chain, a very long chain, a very heavy chain. And I carry this for 1 or 2 reasons. Number one, it's great for pulling a log back to the fire at night. But the other reason is you can lay it out on the ground, and you know the old saying, if you wrap one piece of cotton around 2 hands and try and pull it, it breaks. Wrap 2, a bit harder, 3, 4, etc. You'll get to the point where you cannot break that cotton. And what I find with the chain, it is the best thing since sliced bread in situations of, like I was out in the desert up the Canning Stock route. We had a major rain event hit us, and on the flat open plains down the southern end, there's these large flat silty rocky flat areas which are full of water. There are no trees, there are no anchor points whatsoever to put it up to. I mean, if you're really getting energetic, you can get out and dig a hole and bury a spare wheel and put yourself out, then fill the hole back in and put your wheel back underneath the car, etc, etc. But what I do is I lay the chain out on the ground, and about every 4th or 5th link I start banging tent pegs through it. And it only needs a tent peg, 6-inch tent peg through each one. And I go back to the car, hook it up, the winch, pull myself out that way. Sometimes I've had to go back and put nearly 100 tent pegs in, but who cares? It gets you out without digging a dirty great hole. It works, and it works quite well. I've used this technique in the sand country, although in the sand it's a wee bit different. The sand's a lot softer and it's a bit harder to pull against. So if the sand is wet, it works quite well, and if it's dry, it's a bit harder. But it will work if necessary. What I quite often do is get my shovel, push my shovel in the ground, wrap the end of the chain around the shovel, hook that in, that gives me a blade, and then all the way back to the winch I put a tent peg in, as many as I've got with me. And that works and works well. The next piece of equipment that you must have is a patch repair unit. Now that's my patch repair unit, which is starting to show signs of wear and tear from the last trip, and I have to restock this before I go out again. I have varying patches and varying rubbers and so forth. I have the plugs, and I'll show you which plugs I prefer to use. I don't like some of the plugs. This particular kit I don't recommend you buy. This kit is a good kit. The pin to clean the holes out works very well, but this little unit here, I believe you should get the one with the steel ring that's around here, and that stops you going straight through, because on several occasions I've been patching tyres and I've pushed it and it's gone straight through, and when I pulled it back out again, of course the patch comes out, it's sitting inside the tyre, and I had to get another one out and do it again. So it's a bit extravagant that way, but always have one of these kits with you, with the patches and the appropriate bits and pieces. Within the kits, when you get one, they've got all sorts of equipment. There's the wax to push the tyre plugs in and so forth. Spare valves, spare stems are always handy. Always take a few spare valves and a few spare stems. You know, the valve stems that you pull through the wheel. I've got the tool also to pull them through the wheel, and they work quite well, and I wouldn't be away without them. Now from here, I always carry a piece of thin rubber. That piece of thin rubber is always used for patching things. You'll be surprised how many times you can use a thin piece of rubber and pack it in over relays and so forth. CRC, of course. The other thing I carry in my kit is a roll of wire. That's multi-strand wire. There's about 20 metres in there. That wire I use for an antenna. Quite often with the auto-tune radios, the 737 network radio or even amateur radio equipment, you cannot be heard, or you can't hear anyone. If you pine a piece of wire on it, spread it out across the top of the trees, and I've spread the wire out across the top of the bushes in the tanami, which is probably only about a metre and a half off the ground, to places where it's been 20 or 30 metres off the ground. It makes a difference. The bigger the antenna, the more the capture area, the greater the capture area, the better the signal will work. But you can only use this on radios with auto-tuners on them. Don't use this on CVs, because you will blow your CV up. Okay, the next piece of equipment that you must have, and this is we're up to must have. There's a walkie-talkie, a handheld walkie-talkie, and an 80-channel UHF CV. Both units are extremely important to have in the four-wheel drive when you're out in the desert. You can communicate with the other vehicles in the convoy. You can also hear other vehicles coming. One of the things I always do is I have the radio on scan. Now when it's on scan, you hear any other radio traffic starting to come up, you know there's other vehicles. And if you're going into the remote places that I go into, it'll be other vehicles on the same track you're on. And if you listen for a bit, you can usually work it out whether they're going towards you or going away from you. So there's nothing worse than come thumping up the side of a sand dune and come thumping over the top and find somebody going in the opposite direction. That's suicidal and can get very bloody painful as well as expensive. One of the luxuries that I take with me is the blind up the top here, which I roll out, and I have a remote. These remotes you can buy on the internet. These remotes are great little things. I have the LED lights, a row of LED lights across the top here and a row of LED lights on the end of the blind when it comes out. I can push the remote button, turns the lights on, push the remote button that turns it off. It means that I can go to bed in my swag and then turn the lights off. Or if I hear a noise at night, I can push the button, turn the lights on, I look outside the swag, and if there's anything going on, I can see. Greatest thing invented since sliced bread, that is. You can never ever find the torch you took to bed with you. I can guarantee you'll never find it when you go to bed in the swag. Okay, going from there. I do also have a shackle in my kit, but I try not to pull that out and use it. I try to keep that well away because I don't think it's clever using it unless I really, really have to. And I think there's only been about 3 times in my life actually that I've ever actually had to use it, which is pretty good to me. It's pretty good. Okie doke. Another little thing. All the do-gooders and that will always go cooking me. I always carry some ground white pepper with me, a couple of packets of this stuff. It's great if you had a radiator leak. You could just pour it in the radiator and that'll stop it leaking, and it's only a matter of flushing it. Then you can flush it out afterwards. Now, on the Hilux, I have a tap water here, I have the fridge here, the gas stove here, the gas bottle here. On the back corner up here, I have a solar regulator. On the roof of the vehicle, on the back, I have 2 150 watt solar panels, and on the front of the vehicle, I have a 100 watt solar panel. The 100 watt solar panel is wired in such a way that I have a 2-way switch up here where I can switch it from this battery that I have underneath or to that battery which is underneath. I use this battery for my fridge, that battery for the HF radios over there. I have a multiple switch at the back here where I've got hard wiring through to the front battery. I can actually flick this switch one way or the other and start my engine off one of the batteries in the back if the front engine fails and I'm out in the desert. I also have a wired in inverter to give me 240 volts, a couple of kilowatts, and I also have fuses which are easily accessible. All the lights on this side of the vehicle on the inside here, all these lights, every one of them work off that fuse board, off that battery. And the ones that are on that side of the vehicle work off this fuse box at this side of the vehicle. And if you're wondering why that is, it's very, very simple. If the fuse pops on this side, the light over there goes out. So I come over here and have a look and I've got a light. The fuse pops the other way around, vice versa, I have a light. So that's the reason why they're wired in like that. Now, I carry a good air gauge with me. I have an air compressor wired in to the car, an air reserve on the compressor, and I've got a flow regulator which I've set up on the compressor, which is off a spray paint unit. And what I do is I can adjust the pressure on that spray paint unit to set the pressure I want in my tyres. All I have to do is walk outside, clip the hose on, squeeze the button in here, and whatever pressure it wants to be at, it'll let the tyre down to that pressure or pump it up to that pressure. It's a great way to do it. I've got the pressure gauge on here, of course, so I know what's going on. I've also got a snap-on connection on both sides of the vehicle, one on each side, where you can connect the hose up. So in other words, you just push the hose in the side there, come on the other side, do the same on the other side, so you can pump up your tyres, let them up, down, etc. One of the things that I've discovered over many years of travel in the outback is transferring fuel. Transferring fuel is always a problem. It's a messy business. It always has been a messy business. It always will be a messy business. You can have long-range tanks, you can do all sorts of things, but you will get to the place where you need another jerry or something else. And this Hilux has got the filler pipe just there, the one that comes with the vehicle, and that's a mongrel of a spot to fill up. Trust me, that is a mongrel of a spot to put a jerry up to and pour in. Everything's in the way. So what I've got my long-range tank, which is 230 litres. It's in the back here. It's double-seamed all the way around. And that tank, actually, I can pump directly out of that tank with this immersion pump, this 12-volt immersion pump. Hence the reason for the cigarette lighter plugs out here. I just dip that straight in, put the hose straight in, and I can pump straight out, and I can pump down to my bottom tank. The reason I like doing that is I have a filter on the line, and I actually like to filter the fuel twice. I also have an immersion pump, one of these little dip pumps. You dip them in and out until you fill the hose up, and they'll pump as well. I find having both sources useful. I do not like relying on one thing only. If you rely on one thing only, you'll come to grief. This last trip, the air hose connector on this side failed, and we couldn't get an air hose to connect onto it. It wouldn't stay in. The valve itself actually jammed the connection, so I had to use the one on the other side. Now, because I made my air hose long enough to reach from that side to all the wheels this side, or from this side to all the wheels on that side, I didn't find myself in the problem. The next little trick that I do, it's very, very simple. In the truck here, I have a 12-volt water pump, which is a water flow pump. I also have a filter, which I'll show you shortly. This filter goes into the fuel tank, into the water tank. The water tank's overflow comes back out on this pipe here. The reason it comes out of this pipe here is I can snap a hose on here and drop a jerry can or something down here, and I can fill the 20-litre jerry cans or the bucket up with freshly filtered water, so I don't end up not having water that's not filtered. Now, when I'm filling my tank, it's very easy. What I do not trust one filter. I have two filters. This is the second filter I have. That's my fill point just there. I snap that one on. I take that garden hose with me with the fittings. My pump snapped on the end of the hose, and I can pump from down a 30-foot well, which I did on the canning stock route. I can pump the water up out of the well, pump it into my tank, refurbish my water supply with nice, clean, fresh water. And because I'm using two filters, and there's the silver stuff that's in them, which helps to stop the bacteria and so forth. This last few times that I've used this type of system, I haven't ended up with a dose of the trots. And until you've had a dose of the trots from the water in the outback, you have no idea what fun's all about. Believe me, you have no idea. Now, let's go to the vehicle. The vehicle I'm leaning against right now is a standard 2008 turbo diesel Hilux. The only mods that I've actually done to it, when I bought this one, it was a BHP one. It gets sold off when they've been used for a while. Now, what happens is they come out with a roll cage in them, so I left the roll cage in them, and they have this tray built on the back. So I've modified the tray and put a box on the back here. The box I built myself out of aluminium to make it lighter, and that's virtually all it is. The only modification I've made to the vehicle underneath was I added heavy duty springs at the back, which actually raised the back about an inch. The rest of the suspension is all standard. The sump guards, all the guards underneath the vehicle came with the vehicle, so they were standard, although I will be strengthening the guards. I don't think they're strong enough, and I bent a couple of them when I was away on this trip. So I will be straightening them back out again. What else have we got? Okay, because I'm an amateur, a fully licensed amateur, I've also got my amateur radio equipment with me. So I have two forms of HF communications. I can easily use the 737 network, which is 0480. I haven't used it for a bit, and my on-call sign is Vic K3 Alpha Mike November. Either one, both have travellers nets on them, although the amateur travellers net has been running a lot longer than the 737 network. In my travels around Australia, any time I've needed assistance, I've always been able to go. The other trick that I always have my shovel. I always have a lighting device to burn the paper when I bury it. And what else do I have? I have two heavy-duty batteries as well as the main battery in the front. What else do I have? I can't think of what else I normally have. Okay, now, depending on where you're going to go, on the equipment you take with you. If I'm going out in the desert, I don't take a chainsaw with me because there are no trees out there with a chainsaw chopping your way through. When I go to the high country, Victorian high country, I always take a minimum one chainsaw, probably two, to cut my way through sometimes. There are trees across the roads and so forth. I don't make my tracks around the trees. I cut holes, cut through the tree and drive and go through them. I'm responsible, and this is how all four-wheel drivers should be responsible and look after the environment. Now, what else have we got? Okay, if you're going to go out in the desert or into the sand or anything else, you need a sand flag. The Simpson Desert in South Australia now has passed legislation that the sand flag has to be a given height and a given size. Be careful when you're buying sand flags. Make sure they comply with the measurements of size and height, because if you do go out to the Simpson with the other ones that are not legal, they can knock you back or fine you, and it's not worth the bother. Whenever I'm in the desert and travelling, I quite often have a yellow flashing light which sits up on the roof up here. A little yellow flashing light. If I'm travelling in the desert, getting towards late in the evening, I have the flashing light going, or in the early morning. I try not to drive at these times, but occasionally you do get caught trying to get back to camp or getting across to a campsite. I have these lights flashing when I'm out in the desert because they do attract attention, and the light can be seen over the top of the sand dune, where the flag can't necessarily be seen over the sand dune. And yes, I'm well aware of the new flags with the lights on the pole and all the whiz-bang technology, but believe me, how long's that piece of string and how deep's your pocket? Tyre levers I always have with me when I'm out in the desert. I always have a set of tyre levers and big King Dick screwdrivers. You'll find two big screwdrivers and a couple of tyre levers are the best way to get these tyres off these rims if you have to pull one off for any reason. I have a 2-ton press, a 1.5-ton press with me. It's just here. What I do is I open the driver's door, put the tyre in the ground, drive the vehicle over and turn the wheel and drive around the tread, and I can actually break the breed. I've never had any trouble getting those split rims off, and I've never had trouble getting these tubeless tyres off. It's just a matter of practice, and you get quite good at it after a while. The only problem is when you're putting them together after you've had them apart in the desert is the sand gets into the joints and is a bit of a pain in the neck to try and keep the sand out. So for that reason I carry a small blue tarp with me, and the small blue tarp, it gets used to crawl under the truck. It also gets used when I'm putting the tyres back together again. I put them on it, make sure there's no sand in the joints and so forth, and put them together. There's nothing worse than putting it together and having sand in the seal and you can't get the bloody thing to seal, and you spend the next 2 or 3 times pulling it off, putting it on again, trying to get it to seal. Been there, done that, not fun. Okay, what else is there? Okay, as I said, this is my second filter which goes in line into the water tank. I have 2 tanks on board. I always take a 20-litre drum as well as the main water tank that's in here. This is my water pump which is bolted down. It doesn't move, doesn't go anywhere else. This is my immersion point for my fuel pump to pump the fuel out. This is the water pipes, of course, coming out of the tank. By doing this and bringing it inside, it stops people stealing fuel. You need a key to open the door to get in here to do it. So it stops people nicking fuel. And if you've got 230 odd litres in a tank and you paid $3.40 a litre for it, which I did at Cotton Creek this trip, that's a fairly serious piece of money and well worth knocking that much fuel off, because you get a good amount of fuel out of it. Okay, there's the twin cylinder compressor that sits up here. There's normally a little air tank that's in here as well, but at the moment it's not in here. I'm doing some maintenance on it. After a big trip I have a tendency to pull everything to pieces and check it. With the compressor, I found that they put the power wires together on one of these electrical terminals where you push the wires in and just screw the little nut up. Of course, with constant vibration, they all fell apart on the trip, and we had to gerrymander them when I'm away. And I've just had this out up the shed here, and I've actually pulled all that stuff out, soldered all the wires together, removed the faulty switch that was in here, and then I've actually taken all the wires and heat shrink them. There's a little stuff you can get from Jacquard called heat shrink, which will shrink over the joints so they no longer short out and they won't cause you a problem in the future. This little unit here is my Barrett radio, which I will be upgrading when I get a chance. I'd like to go up to one of the newer Icons. They're a nice little radio to use, and that's it within here. What I've actually got, that's my 737 network call sign. I'm a member of the forwarddrivetrip.com.au, which is a free group, and they post trips on a regular basis of different areas of skill levels. And quite a nice group. I've had a trip with them. We all have our tubes to put our poles and so forth in, and our flags and etc. when we're not using them. One of the biggest faults I've found with these tubes is that they break through. So what I've done is I've actually cut a piece of aluminium out, about 1.2 mil aluminium, and I've sliced elastically it inside both blanking paps, one at each end. And as the pipes bang back and forth into it, it gives it a bit more strength, and you don't tend to lose the tube out of it. It's nothing worse than pulling up at night and find you punched a hole through here and all your poles are gone and everything else. It's a bit of a pain. So I have cured that problem. Okay then, that's the tyres that I took on the last trip. They were a brand new set of tyres when I left, and I had no problem with them. I've moved over to these tyres now, which are 20 millimetres wide on a track on the ground, and run quite well. Now, because the new Hiluxes, or the Hiluxes today, have a limited slip diff in the front and the back, it makes it very, very easy to get up and down these hills. I did the canning this year on my own with no backup. Okay, I did the canning stock route this year, which was a major trip that I've always wanted to do. And we had a considerable amount of rain at the beginning of it down at Wiluna. And as we got up, it was still a bit wet, virtually all the way up until we got nearly up to Halls Creek before we started to get back into the dry. So I had a wet trip up the canning, but nevertheless, we had a great trip. And believe me, I'm suffering from the cold since I've been back. I run the tyres in the vehicle. It's very simple. My front tyres were down at 18 pound. My back tyres were down at 22 pound. I run those virtually all the way through the canning, and I drove up and down every sand dune with no problems at all. The only problem I had was 3 separate occasions. One occasion in the flat country, I got stuck with the water. I broke my own rules and went off the track slightly, and got myself stuck quite well, and we had to get ourselves out. Luckily we managed to get it out with a bit of grass and so forth under the wheels, and we drove back onto the track. The next time I got lost, I got stuck, was I was going up the sand hill, and the sat nav said turn right, but the track went straight ahead, and there was another track to the right. And of course the tyre marks of the vehicle in front of me went straight up the sand hill, so Muggins went straight up the sand hill. And when Muggins got to the top of the sand hill, he broke two more of his own rules. He actually went to the left to turn, and realised that the road had run out, and that was a mistake. I should have gone into the soft sand and come out of the soft sand into the harder sand, rather than go from the harder sand to the soft sand. I possibly would have made it around the corner if I had done that. Although, in hindsight, she's always right. I wouldn't have had a tree to winch to, because the tree wouldn't have been in the right place. The next time I got stuck on the sand dune is that I just didn't quite give it enough grunt coming up the hill, and these idiots towing trailers up there dug a great hole, and I got bogged in the hole. It was only a little bit of shovel work, back down the hill, then boom, straight up over the top. To say that the sandhills are easy to do is an understatement. The trick with the sand, and from watching so many people struggle so much over the years, I've come from a big Land Cruiser down to a Hilux, which is a wee bit easier to drive in the sand than Land Cruiser was. But I can assure you the secret of going up the sand dunes is let the vehicle find its own way up. Don't fight it. It'll bang around a bit and slip around a bit in the ruts and that on the ground. Let it find its own way and keep the steady power on, and don't back off until you're over the top. When you get near the top, most people lift their foot, and that's when they get stuck. Do not lift your foot when you're up that far. Keep the foot down, keep the power on, and drive over the top. On a lot of the sand dunes, I was driving over on autopilot. I had the cruise control set. I had this thing in second or third low, and we were just going up and over the hills with no trouble at all. And she just did it on cruise control. So why the people were getting bogged in front of me is beyond me. One bloke says, "Oh no, you've got the turbo and I don't have," and everything else. When I told him how to do it, that next sand dune, he did it that way, straight over the top. He listened to all the other idiots. From then onwards, he got bogged again. Each vehicle must be driven differently. If someone else is driving a Nissan or a Land Cruiser and you're driving a Hilux or a Pajero or something else, don't necessarily listen to how they do it, because what they do may not work with your vehicle. Your vehicle is a different vehicle and it performs differently. The weight balance is different, the tyre load is different, and also the torque is different out of the engine. The trick is make sure you got plenty of torque, plenty of grunt, don't back off. That'll leave for me.